Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Napoleon Total, and today we're back with another Enlisted video. And this time I'm going to be doing Tier 2 for the USSR in terms of the entire tech tree review. For Tier 2 in the USSR, we're going to be covering the weapons, the lineups, the perks, and the suggestions. Of course, this video has been made possible for the friends at Discord, meaning if you haven't liked, subscribed, or joined the Discord, I highly suggest that you do. With that said, let's get started. In terms of rifles for Tier 4, we start with the Mosin M44 carbine, essentially a upgraded version of the Mosin rifle in the later years of the war. That said, moving on, we have the Mosin M9130 rifle, which in my opinion is one of the better rifles for the Mosin. And of course, of which we have the final rifle, which is the Winchester. Now the Winchester, as right now, is one of the best rifles in game. The reason why is because it uses a lever system to essentially fire the bullets, and it does have 5 rounds, meaning you can just down people really quick. Hence the Winchester M1895 is a must get. That said, let's move on to the assault weapons. For one, we have two weapons, and these are going to be the PPS-42 and the PPS-43. These are so similar in the fact that I can't really tell the difference visually, but in terms of the gameplay, I'm highly suggesting you get the PPS-43 because that thing, in my opinion, is much better because it does have 700 rate of fire, so that's going to be that. In terms of the heavy weapons, you do get the Madsen, but I highly suggest that you don't use the Madsen because, as of right now, the Soviet machine guns, they suck. But I do also highly suggest that you upgrade the machine gun squad because that thing is one of the squads that you're gonna be relying on. The reason why I don't like the Madsen is because the Madsen itself is a bad weapon. That said, let's move on to heavy weapons. For the Soviets, we have an anti-tank weapon called the PTRS-41. The Soviet PTRS-41 can frontally take out German tanks at Tier 2 and Tier 3, which is pretty good if you ask me. Of course, there are a lot of problems with the PTRS. One of them is that you practically cannot run, and the fact that you practically have to be prone. Of course, this also allows you to fire in semi-automatic mode, so that's going to be very good. And after that, we have the GATS AAA. This is essentially the Soviet milk truck used on the battlefield, transportation vehicle that has a spawn point. So that's going to be good. It has a maximum crew of 15, and it allows you to essentially use as a mobile spawn. Highly suggest that you use it, and let's move on to the tanks. In terms of tanks, you start with the T-50, followed up by the T-28 and the T-28E. In my opinion, the T-50 is a much better tank than the T-28 series. The difference here is that the T-26 and the T-28E have a 75mm gun, or should I say a 76mm gun, and the T-50 has a 45mm gun. The difference is that the T-50 has a lot more armor than the T-28, and of which the armor is slanted, so that makes the armor better. That said, let's move on to planes. We have the SB-2M, which is a pretty good plane with 6 100kg bombs, which in my opinion at this tier it's pretty good. After that, we have the Yak-7B, followed by the P-40E-1. Now, in my opinion, the P-40E-1 is a much better plane than the Yak-7B because the bomb load. It has 2 100kg bombs and 1 250kg bombs, not to mention the 6 Browning machine guns, which is already terrifying. For those who don't know, the P-40E-1 is the American Warhawk lend-lease to the Soviet Union. That's it. Continuing on with Tier 2, we have the IL-2 1941 and the Su-2 M82. The IL-2 1941 has essentially 8 rockets, 4 50kg bombs, and 2 20mm cannons, and 2 7.62 machine guns. The Su-2, on the other hand, has 6 machine guns and 6 100kg bombs, essentially, in my opinion, SB-2M. Now, the difference here is the fact that the IL-2 1941 is a very good plane in most regards. Therefore, your only two options at this tier is really the P-40E-1 and the IL-2. So that's that. That said, that is pretty much the weapons. Let's move on to the lineups. I highly suggest that you bring in an assaulter squad with the PPS-43. I also highly suggest that you bring an engineer squad with the Winchester M1895, follow that up with a machine gun squad with the Madsen. Now, all of these squads I highly suggest that you get because these are very good squads. The Madsen is probably the worst squad to get, but on the other hand, the Madsen is a pretty good weapon, having 12 hit power and a very good, decent damage. I also suggest that if you do not want to bring the Madsen, I highly suggest that you bring the GATS AAA because that thing is a mobile spawn and very good. That said, I highly suggest that you bring a tank, and that is going to be the T-50. You can also bring a plane, which I do suggest as the P-40E1. So that's that. That is all for your lineup. A Soldier Squad, a Machine Gun or a Mobile Rally Point Squad, or otherwise known as the GATS AAA, and of course, you have the Radio Operator Squad, and a tank or a plane, depending on your choice. That said, let's move on to the perks. In terms of perks, this is going to be the exact same as last time, and in terms of perks, I highly suggest that you get Vitality. Highly suggest that you get plus 75% medic pack usage speed and minus 40% vertical recoil. In terms of perks for the tankers, highly suggest that you get a perk called the Change the type of ammunition without losing reload progress perk for the loader, and plus 20% tank gun reload speed perk for the tankers. In terms of the planes, there's only pretty much one perk that you can have to get, and that's minus 60% damage when hard landing with a parachute. Other perks, you can decide to do whatever you want. That said, let's move on to the suggestions. At tier 2, the USSR is at a very good spot. For one, the PPS-43 is a very good weapon, the T-50 is a very good tank, and of course, the PTRS and the various other weapons are very, very good. So is the GATS AAA. The same can be said about their planes. The only real issue about tier 2 is the fact that the Soviet weapons, in terms of the PPS-43, is a little bit lacking in hit power, but that is pretty much fine. In terms of everything else, there's not a lot you can do at tier 2. In my opinion, tier 2 is one of the most fun tiers, so I highly suggest that you just stay at tier 2 and grind for tier 3. But do not play tier 3 because tier 3 would be a little bit disappointing, especially the fact that tier 3 has the unfortunate ability to either fight at tier 2 or up tier against tier 4. But that is all it for tier 2 Soviet Union. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.